Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. Today we're going to be focusing on probably the number one international institution that impacts all 8.3 billion people around the planet every day, and that is the United Nations. Who leads the United Nations? We're going to find out who has led it and who's going to perhaps lead it in the future. My guest today is an expert on this topic. Dr. Jean Krasno is on the faculty of the Department of Political Science at the City College of New York, and she is also a lecturer at Columbia University. The United Nations Policy and Practice is her most recent book. Dr. Krasno was authorized by the former United Nations Secretary-General Kofi Annan to organize his papers for publication. She is now leading a campaign to elect a woman United Nations Secretary-General, and there's more on their website at womensg.net. Dr. Jean Krasno, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. Bill, you and I have known each other for several years on various different topics,
That's right.
the publication of the Kofi Annan papers. So, I will always enjoy talking to you.
Oh, and we've known for decades, but we were 11 years old when we started.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
that's right. Well, Jean, thank you so very much. And let's get right into it. Of course, we know the United Nations was created in 1945, almost at the end of World War II, created to eliminate the scourge of war, to promote economic and social development, and to enhance human rights around the world. There have been 9 secretaries-general of the United Nations, all men, and now they're in the process of selecting the 10th, or they will be in the process of selecting the 10th. And there's a push now, and there has been a push in the past, to elect a woman as Secretary General. Let's talk about that. First off, what does the Secretary General do? What in this case, what has he done up to this point?
All right. Well, that is actually a really good question, because when the charter was written, it was really envisioned that the Secretary General would be an administrator, be the top person of the staff of the Secretariat, and, would make those kinds of administrative decisions. But in the charter, they left open a little window for a political role, and that is Article 99, which states that if the Secretary General deems that there is a threat to international peace and security, the Secretary General can bring that issue to the attention of the Security Council. So that has been a really interesting little crack in the ability of the Secretary General to play a more political role. And in the beginning, Trygve Lie did some of that. Dag Hammarskjöld opened it a little wider by saying to the Security Council that he was going to travel to Peking, as it was called at that time, to discuss the humanitarian release of certain American Air Forcemen that had been captured in the Korean War. And he announced it as he was going in his personal capacity as Secretary General, but not on the instructions of the General Assembly or the Security Council, but on humanitarian grounds. And he was very successful in doing that. And since then, other Secretaries General have done more and more and more, including Kofi Annan and others, and Ban Ki-moon. Yeah.
Exactly right. And Kofi Annan in particular was a very hands-on activist Secretary General. Ban Ki-moon, he was more low key, behind the scenes, low profile type of person. And of course, you've got Antonio Guterres, who's the current Secretary General of the UN, who's kind of, I think, a mix between the two of them probably, but that's for another discussion. Well, let's talk about this is a momentous year for the United Nations. Even though the UN and international institutions are under attack, unfortunately, primarily by the United States, but under attack from a lot of different sources. And this is the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. This is very significant, without a doubt. So it would be quite an accomplishment. But let's focus on electing a woman. Yeah, does the UN years ago, they used to move from region to region. I think there were like five regions or something like that. I can't remember. But they say it's an Asian's turn, it's a Latin American's turn, it's a European turn. Are they doing that this year? If it is, it'll be a Latin American probably. But
Well,
what's
okay.
the status of that?
Okay. Well, that is a, not even a precedent, but if you were to say it's anything, I guess you would say it's a precedent. Um, there was never any formal designation that it had to rotate by region. And in the beginning, there was Trygve Lie from Norway, Dag Hammarskjöld from Sweden. Then it went to Uthan, but not because of the region, but because people liked him.
Hmm.
And then it came back to Europe, Kurt Waldheim in Austria. And now we're back again with Guterres. So it's been more Western Europe. The time that it became an issue is when the Africans stepped up right before the nomination of Boutros Ghali and said, look, we've never had an African, and it's our turn. And if the Security Council doesn't give us an African, we have enough votes to block it. And the Security Council paid attention. And so Boutros Ghali was elected. Then he only served one 5-year term. And the Africa group said again, look, he only served one 5-year term. The others had 2 5-year terms. You have to give us another African or we're going to do the same thing. And that's when Kofi Annan was nominated. And then he served 2 5-year terms. And so last time around, well, then it went to Ban Ki-moon because they said, well, it's Asia's turn again. And then after that, it was supposed to go to Eastern and Central Europe because they were now liberated after the fall of the Soviet Union, and they were saying it's their turn. But that didn't happen, and we got another Western European. So it's.
Yeah. So the tradition of moving from region to region may be out the window right now. So we don't worry about that. I'm sure I remember the last two Secretary General elected for 2 5-year terms, or can be elected for 2 5-year terms. And last time there was focus on several females from Latin America. Who are not to name all of them, but are there some? I'm sure there's some really outstanding people who have tossed their hat in the ring or who are being mentioned. Do you have any two or three off the top that you could mention? We're not favoring anybody, but just to get a feel for it.
Well, the Latin American group is saying that it is their turn
Oh, okay.
because they had Javier Perez de Cuellar back when, and they have not had, he was from Peru, and they have not had a Secretary General since then. So they're claiming that it's their turn. There are others saying it really is nobody's turn. It's the best person. But at any rate, from Latin America, there's some really wonderful women. Michelle Bachelet of Chile, um, Rebecca Greenspan from Costa Rica, uh, uh, trying to think more. Oh, my light went out. Sorry. Oh, yes, of course, Alicia Bárcena of Mexico, who's outstanding. And Alicia was the head of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean for many years, and also now is Minister of Environment and Natural Resources in Mexico. And she's, really popular, very, very popular. Another candidate, which is a very interesting issue, is Virginia Gamba. So Virginia was High Commissioner for Children and Armed Conflict until, appointed by Guterres, served 9 years and just stepped down in July. And she's from Argentina, but it looks like Argentina is going to nominate Rafael Grossi, who is now head of IAEA, as their candidate, so a male. Now, in the proposal for the process signed by the joint letter between the president of the General Assembly and the president of the Security Council last month in November, a country can nominate someone who is not a citizen of their country. So Virginia would have to be nominated by a different country than Argentina. So I think it's possible. I think there are countries that would step up and say, we really like her. She was fantastic working with children in armed conflict. And, she could still get nominated. She's Latin
Hmm.
American, but,
Right.
it's still
Yeah.
possible.
Well, all of the women you mentioned are outstanding. I've met all of them, and they are really outstanding and would do an excellent job. And we're going to talk about some of the criteria for selecting the next SG when we come back. Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guests. We'd invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved with a PBS or community access television station, or perhaps an educational institution that has an intra-campus television hookup, or you have a podcast, or perhaps just a computer, you like our shows and you would like to share them, please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided at no cost as a public service to help us better understand international issues. Today, we're taking a look at, without a doubt, the most important international organization there is, and that is the United Nations, and who leads the United Nations, or who has led it for the last 80 years, and who may lead it for the next 5 to 10 years in the future. My guest is an expert on this topic. Dr. Jean Krasno is on the faculty of the Department of Political Science at City College of New York, and she's also a lecturer at Columbia University. Dr. Krasno's recent book is The United Nations Policy and Practice. Jean, we're talking about, oh, very good.
That's the book, yeah.
When we take a look at it. Well, let's briefly, what are some of the criteria for, well, first off, let's, let's do criteria. Just a couple of the criteria, just the tops, not in each detail, but what are they looking for to head the UN?
Well, first of all, we, in the political environment that we're in, where some of the major players are stepping away from multilateralism, we need leadership that can bring the countries of the world together. And that is really, really key. And the UN needs to be re-energized because there's a moral crisis, a financial crisis, and a political crisis that is facing the UN right now. So the UN really needs someone who is a good leader. And I strongly believe that having a woman at the helm would add that kind of excitement and energy to the organization that could bring greater faith back to the people. It's the peoples of the United Nations. And women make up more than half the population and really need to have a voice at the helm of the United Nations. And so we strongly believe that after 80 years of men, very good men, wonderful
Hmm.
leaders, that it would be really refreshing and very exciting to have a woman. Of course, it has to be a really good leader because if a woman is chosen simply symbolically and cannot deal with the crises that we're facing now, then that would be horrific, for the advancement of women. So we who are supporting a woman candidate have on our website, we have listed about 25 or so what we call notable women to show that there are women who are prime ministers, presidents, foreign ministers, defense ministers, uh, leaders in various different ways, heads of agencies that have a practical experience, know how to work multilaterally. So, of course, we want to look for that. One of the big characteristics that we are looking for is a person who is charismatic and communicates well, and also reaches out to the media like yourself, and is open to the media, enjoys the media, because that's how you garner support and that you educate the rest of the world by getting your message across.
That's very true. And the UN has some good media outreach, but I think it could do a lot more. And of course, in the United States, I'm convinced that the media in other parts of the world do a much better, generally speaking, do a better job covering the UN than the American media does. So the American
Yeah,
media, first off, most of them do not understand the United Nations. Secondly, they are reluctant to give the UN any credit for anything it's doing. I remember they talking about, well, white trucks showed up with all this food for the Palestinians or for people in Kiev. Never mentioned the World Food Program, a UN agency, or the UN
yeah,
or these different groups provided various resources. Never mentioned UNICEF, the UN Children's Fund.
yeah.
But there's a bias in this country of not all, but a large number of the media outlets, which are getting more conservative every day. And they really they lack information, and they really don't know what the UN does, and they don't like the UN because they don't know anything about it. But that's we could do a whole program on that. I've I'm one of this group, so I speak of being involved to some degree. So, but anyway, now what would this time frame be? When would the election be? And it'll be if the person is elected, it'll be for 5 years.
All right. So right now, because of this joint letter that I was talking about, the process has begun. It's launched. uh, Countries can now nominate. So in the procedures, it has to be countries that nominate the candidates. So it used to be just secret within the Security Council. Nobody knew what was being talked about, and all of a sudden they would announce a candidate. Now, the new procedure, as it was 10 years ago, is that countries will nominate, and that will be public and transparent. Then each candidate will come to the UN and give a presentation to the General Assembly open to civil society. So
Mhm.
that is going to start, I think, after the holidays. I think everybody's kind of waiting. There's all this speculation about who's going to nominate whom. But I think starting January, we'll really start. And then throughout the spring, the candidates will be coming to New York and will be giving their presentations to the General Assembly. They have to submit a vision statement, which will be transparent and available for people to see. And then we, as our campaign to elect a woman Secretary General, will also be holding some, parallel events at different locations in New York for each candidate, each woman candidate. And we're also going to be doing a series of video interviews, which we will then make available to member states and on social media so that people can get to see the candidates and really get to know them and what their vision for the UN is and what their experience is. So I think it'll be an exciting time. It's going to be
It is certainly going to be, and our viewers can go to womansg.net to get more information. And this is an extremely important position, and it's crucial to get a communicator. So, first off, somebody who's knowledgeable. Secondly, somebody who's committed, and a communicator who can talk not only to the 193 countries that are in the UN General Assembly, but to talk to leaders around the world and to talk to the various publics. And they need to reach out to inform the public, especially in the United States.
yeah.
It's appalling to see how many people have no earthly idea what the UN does.
Yeah.
They don't realize there are UN agencies that help to move aircraft, ships, mail, weather information in international space. They have no idea what UNICEF, although a lot of people are part of the Trick or Treat for UNICEF, or they're perhaps Rotarians who are working with UNICEF to eliminate polio, those types of things. They have no idea what peacekeeping does or what it's supposed to do. And so it's critical that we learn more about the UN. Well, we're running short on time. Before we do that, let me ask you, the UN is celebrating its 80th anniversary. It's a tough time for the UN and any international institution, to be quite honest. But what, in the last couple of minutes we have, what are the top two or three things you're taking away from this 80th anniversary as far as what's happening at the UN? I know electing a woman is very important, but what else is going on?
Well, as I was saying before, there's a real challenge to multilateralism, for countries to work together, to accept that when there are global problems facing us, like the environment, like security, like humanitarian crises, migration, that we have to have global solutions. And that requires everybody to contribute. So that what we have to convince member states is that the common good is in the interest of every individual state. So there's not really a competition between my national interest and global interest. It is together. The common interest for global problems requires everybody to work together. So, I think that's the big challenge to the UN right now, because,
Ex-
yeah,
It certainly is. And if the members don't, not all 193, but especially the main players, the five permanent members of the Security Council, if they're not working together in tandem, moving in the same direction, it's very difficult for the UN to achieve anything because it's not a one world government. It doesn't impose taxes on people.
right.
It's a, really an organization that brings together basically every country in the world to try to come to some agreement to work out the problems, like you said, on climate change or eliminating diseases. And it is not an enemy of the United States. It's not stealing our sovereignty, as you hear some of the right wingers talking about here.
Yeah.
It's not. But before we got about a minute and a half left, I mentioned a couple of the myths you hear. What do you hear as far as misinformation, disinformation, myths, outright lies, to be quite honest, about the UN? Are there one or two that pop into mind immediately?
Well, that the escalators don't work.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So really, I mean,
That's right.
silly
I
things.
forgot about that.
Yeah, just silly things. But what I'm disappointed in the media, because the editors of the New York Times and the Washington Post and so forth used to have writers that covered the UN on a regular basis. Uh, uh, Barbara Costet was one that I used to work with quite a bit, but there were others, and now you don't see that. And so the people who write about the UN don't know that much about it. And so they are uncomfortable in writing any in-depth piece because they don't, unfortunately, they don't have the depth of information because they're not supported by their editors. That's, that's a problem. But I think that, when Kofi Annan was Secretary General, he was so charismatic and so articulate and so willing to go on talk shows and invite the media to the residence or to the UN. There was much more coverage because he was so outgoing, and when he would start speaking, everyone would go silent because they wanted to hang on every word. So we need somebody like that that would re-energize the UN and get the message out. Because as you say, I teach courses on the UN both at Columbia and at City College, and I used to teach at Yale, the same thing. And I was appalled at very bright students and how little they knew.
It
So
is.
we have a big job ahead of us to educate the public.
It is mind-boggling the lack of information, and our educational system has to pick up the slack. and our media too. They have to learn something. I remember one time at the UN at a press conference, and there was some hotshot from a European newspaper who didn't know the difference between the World Food Program and the Food and Agricultural Organization.
Yeah.
Two very important agencies in the UN, and still had no idea. But Gene, you're right. We do have to focus on this. In closing, let me mention I remember a quote by Dag Hammarskjöld, I think it was, who said, "The UN was not created to take us to heaven, but it was created to keep us from hell." And that is actually what the UN is about. We have to have it, whether we like it or not. It's not perfect, but we have to help make it perfect. But Dr. Gene Krasno, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Well, thank you, Bill. I always enjoy talking to you. Your questions are always really provocative and useful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I'm Bill Miller. Thanks for joining us today on Global Connections Television.